What do we do when a work of art empowers one person, but makes another one uncomfortable? Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here, and today we're going to talk about geek culture. More specifically, one of the things that very much matters to geeks in fictional media is the idea of cool, or awesome, badass, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes we fall in love with a work simply because it amazes us with the right kind of spectacle. That's certainly how I feel about anime of the 80s and 90s. Seriously, who cares if things make sense when they look that great? That said, what fans consider to be cool is subjective. For example, the lightsaber. Who doesn't think lightsabers are cool? I could spend all day trying to explain why I find them cool. From the spectacular choreography of lightsaber duels, flashing colors, to the cathartic excitement of swinging the blade and hearing that whoosh sound. But what all of that boils down to is the feeling we get when engaging with them, our gut reaction, our aesthetics. Things are cool just because, and that's fine. There's no rule as to what can and can't be cool. And our feelings can change over time as a result of our exposure and experiences. As for myself, when I was a tiny boy, I was obsessed with jetpacks and capes. I played with Legos, and specifically sought out those diving tanks you could put on the minifigs. I'd stuff dragons' fire pieces into the tanks to make it look like the Lego men were rocketing around the place. I even had a pink Lion King backpack I'd wear all the time, for no other reason than I thought it was cool, and I pretended it was some sort of jetpack. In grade school, I became obsessed with Mario, thinking he was the coolest, most badass character ever, even more so than Link. Then Pokemon came out, and I was enraptured, not by the Poke critters themselves, but by the human characters. The whole Chosen One aspect of the second movie really got me as a kid. Then came anime as a whole, alongside Final Fantasy VII. Cloud, with his spiky hair and buster sword, became my paragon of cool. This invited me to feel empowered by dozens of anime protagonists with similar aesthetics. Admittedly, I was a young teen with a growing libido, and I naturally found myself crushing on the female characters of these works, but it wasn't until Artoria Pendragon that I began to identify with them. Saber was a phenomenon. As a guy, I started out identifying with parts of Shiro, looking at Artoria from a male perspective, or that of an outsider. By the time Fate Zero rolled around, that interest started evolving. Saber became cooler, more empowering than any male hero ever had. Her battle dress, her energy-blasting sword, her fierce voice and noble attitude all culminated into helping me realize that it's okay to feel empowered by her. This sparked a transition in myself where I could start identifying with or role-playing as these strong female characters. I can't pin it all on Saber, since I grew up on shows like Sailor Moon, but at that age, I felt a huge pressure not to be seen in public identifying with girl heroes. Thus, Saber was the first time I wanted to express myself through feminine power. Admittedly, I worried what that said about me. Was I somehow less of a man? Should I be embarrassed? Saber helped me say, screw that, who cares? All these male characters are cool and all, but when I opened myself up to these fictional females, I discovered a whole world of awesome I'd never fully embraced. Now, when I play Final Fantasy VII, it's because of Tifa. I get bummed when a new Tales game comes out without someone as attractive and determined as Mila or Velvet in the playable cast. I finally got to experience the glory of Metroid, exclusively because I knew Samus was a tough, bodysuit-wearing beauty. Lucina and Tharja reawakened my interest in Fire Emblem, not just so I could stare at them, but because I could be them. Because of this, I enjoy anime and games more now than I ever did before. I don't feel even the slightest bit of embarrassment about this. For me, women became the new cool. That said, times change, and I've begun to feel a new type of social pressure, a shame for liking what I like. Many of the female characters I love have come under fire for the way they're dressed and portrayed. Suddenly, these characters I look up to and gained inspiration from are being treated as victims, needing rescuing and social reform. Naturally, a lot of this comes from their portrayal as attractive. Certain groups in society are rejecting sexy female heroes because of the supposed standards it places on real women, feeling the pressure to hit unrealistic expectations. Any men who defend these original designs are quick to be labeled virgins, incels, neckbeards, pedos, and perverts, when for many that's simply not the case. For me, the bare midriffs, abs, thigh highs, skirts, upskirt kicks, cleavage, and underboob have all become part of my aesthetic vocabulary as things that I find awesome, in the same way my child self used to like jetpacks, capes, giant swords, and how many people around the world love lightsabers. The critique that these are unrealistic doesn't matter. The Incredibles made fun of how capes are a detriment to a superhero because they get caught in stuff and serve no practical purpose. But that doesn't stop the fact that they're aesthetically cool. For similar issues of practicality, women in the police or military are supposed to tie up their hair so they can't get grabbed by it. But that doesn't mean we can't get excited seeing C2 in a combat situation. We've got YouTubers like Shadversity, who dedicate themselves to investigating the actual usefulness of many fantasy weapons. But there's always an artistic perspective that wants to pretend, to make believe said weapons are practical. Anime pits heroes with swords against enemies with guns all the time, though in real life, they'd quickly get shot and killed. But the aesthetics of swords holds a cathartic value, a sense of technique and discipline that we love seeing overcome the odds. Let's look at Alyssa from God Eater. I mention her a lot, but it's relevant. Look at this freeze frame. Let's count the unrealistic things in it. She has long hair, unfit for battle. There's the obvious midriff and breast exposure, particularly with how unlikely those melons would ever stay under that feeble flap of cloth called a top. She's got heels, which are clearly a handicap. She has a hat, which would have to be glued to her head to stay on while fighting. But put that in context. She has a giant sword that is likely many times heavier than her, a sword that can transform into a gun, or even unleash a monstrous set of fangs to om-nom her enemies. She's swinging this sword after jumping high into the air from rest at a mutated lion god that channels electricity. None of this is realistic. None of it. It's all fantasy, and we know it. Yet her criticism comes from the outfit alone. I'm sorry to say this, but no amount of heavy fabric is going to protect her from a monster that could tear her in half with a single slash. When it comes to taking damage, we're almost always suspending our disbelief for the sake of a more fun experience. Otherwise, everyone in a video game would have to be like Master Chief, covered from head to toe in Mjolnir armor, robbing many franchises of their creative identities. Now, it's not to say that more clothed characters would be less badass. Again, I love heroes like Lucina, and even Rey from Star Wars on a cosmetic level. But that doesn't mean some exposed skin would ruin them. I got called out by someone in the comments of my first Tifa reaction video for saying I find midriffs as awesome as some people find lightsabers. That's not just an excuse for fapping. I really mean it. Society is quicker to lock onto sexual fantasies more often than other fantastical elements in fiction, because women are feeling shamed or victimized by what they perceive to be unattainable beauty standards. They don't want the female body to be commodified. But in fantasy, pretty much everything is, without bias. Yet, many insist that fictional characters are mandating their life choices simply by existing. In other words, they won't let fiction be fiction. Taking the politics out of it, nobody has to find a certain thing aesthetically pleasing for it to exist. A fit woman in her underwear might make some women uncomfortable. But I too have a plethora of things that make me uncomfortable in fiction. I hate seeing SpongeBob walking around in his briefs, for instance. The characters Mr. Bobinsky and the two elderly ladies in Coraline are so obscenely repulsive to me that I refuse to even show them in this video. The mere sight of them legit makes me want to hurl. But you know what? Fiction is allowed to make us uncomfortable. If I don't want to see something, I don't look at it. Simple, yeah? But I get it. I sense the sincerity behind women viewing their own bodies in comparison to what's shown in the media. It appears to give the female plight more weight and value in the discussion. I'm not a woman, and as such I feel incriminated for even speaking about this. If there were some magical way for me to become a woman, without the setbacks of modern technology, I'd probably go for it. I'd personally go out of my way to work out and emulate the beauty of my favorite fictional heroines, even if only for the honor of cosplaying them. I have no right to tell women what to do with their bodies, but fictional women don't fall into that same category, especially when it comes to drawings or models. I have every right to claim ownership of my fandom for female characters. I don't care if you think Velvet is slutty, or if Matoi Ryuko is ridiculous. They aren't your characters, they aren't your body, and you have no right dictating whether it's okay for others to like these characters, much less make assumptions about the people who do. Of course, one of the best ways to mediate people's divergent tastes is to include options. You might gasp at the kinds of outfits the Persona girls can be made to wear, but that doesn't mean you have to make use of them. The game is specifically made to cater to a variety of tastes. Games where you can create a character often have this as well. Yet, when devs don't give players options they might enjoy, fans have the power to change things themselves through mods. Not to say the base game is wrong, but rather to give the game more options. For example, I'd be much more excited to play Zelda Breath of the Wild with this mod that lets me play as a female Link. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with male Link, but I personally derive more enjoyment and power from playing as this type of character. Next, I want you to look at this character design. This is a mod fans made for the game Total War 3 Kingdoms, developed by Creative Assembly. I happen to like this design, while the women in the base game are much more modest. This design fits more in line with the kind of awesome I look for in games. It also helps that she looks identical to Ushi Wakamatsu. And yet, this mod, and others like it, were chased out of circulation by the game's own developers, signaling that, to them, it's wrong to use these mods, even if you purchase the base game. One of the game's social media managers, Grace Carroll, saw this design on a community Reddit page and expressed her discomfort, seeing all the game's female characters being reduced to standing around in their underwear. Naturally, a lot of women feel this way about bikini armor, and as I've said, she's obviously allowed to have her own feelings and opinions. But it's important to acknowledge that while she sees it as reducing characters to standing around in their underwear, people like me see it as a ridiculous yet empowering outfit that we find aesthetically cool and want to play as. Sure, the character is standing there right now, but I'd be enthralled to see her take to the battlefield and put those swords to good use. Thus, Carol's discomfort does not make the design wrong. She should not have the final say on its meaning to society or its right to exist. I can say the same for myself, having felt similarly before. When I was in high school, my ex-girlfriend was totally into boys' love and yaoi, while expressively admitting most main female characters in anime bother her. I felt insecure about that. I felt like, somehow, I had to make myself more effeminate to fit her tastes. She was liking men for acting more sensitive and vulnerable than I had any comfort doing at the time. These men were pretty, androgynous even, lacking many of the testosterone-laden traits I had, such as body hair. Defensively, I teased her about it, always pointing out that men didn't normally look or act like that. It was childish and insensitive, and it took time for me to realize how dumb I was. That was her fantasy, what she found aesthetically pleasing. She wasn't holding me to those expectations, and she couldn't give a rat's ass if real-life men didn't fit her fantasy. In some cases, it's precisely because they don't that she'd be attracted to the genre in the first place. Sure, I was an uncomfortable guy, but that didn't give me a special privilege over the ethicality of her male fantasies. Let's imagine, say, Gilgamesh's character designer getting all pissed off that fans were drawing doujins of the created character taking it up the butt from Ritsuka or some other male servant. It's like, so what? Let the yaoi flow, damn it. What one person takes as disrespectful, others can take as beloved and valuable. So what can we take from all this? I think it means that we should all be more respectful of each other's fandoms. That just because you can interpret something for the worst doesn't mean that's how everybody sees it. To me, sexiness is awesomeness, and my appreciation for certain fan-servicey designs isn't meant to objectify or dictate the lives of real women. Just because a character might be female, that doesn't mean women should have more say over their portrayal than a man. Can you think of anything else in media that gets misunderstood and demonized by outsiders? Let's take the discussion to the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and most of all, smashing that notification bell as if it were your waifu. That way you'll never miss out on all of my anime content, lore videos, live streams, and Holy Waifu Wars polls. My vids are struggling to get featured, so that bell is absolutely critical. If you want to support me directly, check out my Patreon or consider donating via Super Chat. And as always, celebrate your fandom.